Dr. Garrett is in the house. We love Dr. Garrett. Audrey, we'll start with you. Confidence level of Joe Schoen getting the next quarterback right.
I will say I do have faith in him to do that. And the reason I say that is because I do believe that the first two drafts that he had, at least the first one, there were some Dave Gettleman scouts in the building. And I think that when you look at the way that his drafts the last couple of years have gone, this year is obviously the best. We'll see 2 years from now if that's true. And look, you could make the argument that they loved Jaden Daniels last year. Didn't everyone love Jaden Daniels and Drake May? Like, probably, yes.
Yeah.
But I do think that their experience with Josh Allen and what they know about the physical and technical skills that Josh Allen has and the success that he's had will give them, Shane at least, the right guidelines of what to look for in a quarterback. And I think that Josh Allen is a big part of that. And I will say that I do think he does a good job doing his due diligence. He's all over the place going to the games. He was just spotted at Colorado's practice. So, he's getting FaceTime with these players. So I think the due diligence is there. I don't know if anyone else does, if you could say that Dave Gettleman did the same, but I do feel like his process is more streamlined. He's obviously more modernized when it comes to that. And I think the Josh Allen thing, it makes me feel like that. And what happened last year with the draft, that he's got enough to hopefully get it right. I think ultimately there's a 50-50 chance on whether or not it works.
Yeah. Chris, you got confidence in Joe Schoen to get the quarterback right?
I mean, I don't have confidence in any GM to get the quarterback right, if I'm being honest. I think it's less than a 50% chance. I think it's a 20% chance. But I think that the narrative that people have said, and I've seen people say this all over Twitter, we can't trust Joe Schoen to make a quarterback pick. I completely disagree with that narrative. He hasn't had an opportunity to take a quarterback. If anything, I could argue the opposite. I could say, when he does take a quarterback, I'm going to trust he really believes in that guy, because he has gone out of his way not to draft a quarterback. He's been very selective with the quarterbacks he's taken. He didn't force a quarterback in 2022. He didn't force a quarterback in 2023. Now, people talk about the Daniel Jones contract. We could talk about that we're blue in the face. I think there was a legitimate reason why they did it. I don't want to get into it because I've talked about it so many times. That wasn't him selecting Daniel Jones. That was him using Daniel Jones as a stopgap until he found the quarterback that he liked. So I don't see a reason to say that he can't do it, but I look at Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. He might be the most brilliant offensive mind in football. He traded 3 first-round picks to get Trey Lance. So anybody can miss on a quarterback. But, yeah, I think Joe Schoen's going to do his due diligence, and I think I have faith that he can select a good quarterback as much as most GMs in the NFL, which is about a 20% chance because most of them miss when they pick that position.
Anthony, do you have confidence that Joe Schoen can pick Cameron Ward and get it right?
Well, I think that, if finding a franchise quarterback was easy, everybody would have one. So I think you're right, Chris. Like, it's tough to be confident in anybody to do that. But at the same time, there's 2 ways of looking at your interpretation of Joe Schoen not drafting a quarterback to this point, which is the one that you had, which is like, when he finally does, he must have some serious conviction about him. Mine is, the guy only drafts for need, and that's why he hasn't taken a quarterback yet, because he had somebody he felt like was the established starter. Anytime a hole opens up on the roster, then he talks himself into whichever player is going to fill that hole in the roster, like he did with Tyler Nubin, who's a good player, and Drew Phillips, those are good players. He hit on those guys, but go back to the 2022 and 23 draft classes, like with John Michael Schmidt, he hasn't panned out. Again, loved the pick at the time, hasn't worked. And I think all of this boils down to the next aspect of this, which is it's not really on the general manager always to get the quarterback right. Oftentimes it's on the coaches. You have to, he can find the guy with all the talent in the world, and the coaches can ruin him. I'm not saying that's how I felt about Daniel Jones, because I didn't feel like he had all the talent in the world, but there were certainly people who did feel that way. And he definitely had some sort of talent coming out of Duke. And in some regards, the Giants ruined him. But even if you don't want to use Daniel Jones as the example, I'm sure that you can pull through the archives of NFL history. Sam Darnold had serious talent coming out of USC. There's been so many quarterbacks. I mean, Browns with Baker Mayfield. Find the examples. They're there. Coaching oftentimes is the real problem. And those are the ones that get the quarterback wrong, whether they're wrong about his skill set, his strengths, his weaknesses, their scheme, the personnel around him. So it's more than just the GM. But if I have to just answer plainly the question, no, I'm not confident in Joe Schoen just because of his draft history and his tendency to draft for need. That's when you start forcing picks. And that's where I feel like the Giants might talk themselves into believing in a guy and loving a guy and then force themselves to take that guy. Maybe he isn't that guy. But again, I think it's really going to come down to how they coach that guy.
See, I agree with Chris. I think that Chris nails it because it was obvious we needed a quarterback going into this year. And there was all that talk about J.D. McCarthy, and he didn't force it. And he didn't force Penix. He wanted Jaden Daniels and Drake May. They weren't there. And he didn't reach. And he wanted C.J. Stroud. That year, obviously, he couldn't get up there and get him. But I feel like he likes talented guys. I feel like the guys that he was interested in were obviously became pretty good quarterbacks. I mean, they're young still, and Stroud is kind of going through a rough patch right now. So is Jaden Daniels for that matter. But I don't know if it's so much that I have confidence or not confidence that he's going to get the pick right. It is like Chris mentioned, and you guys mentioned as well. It's very hard to hit on a quarterback. Chris and I did this where it's like 70% of top 10 quarterbacks fail. It's not easy. The Bears, I don't know what Caleb Williams is going to be, but they haven't had a franchise.
Thought he was a slam dunk,
ever, right?
He was a slam dunk. I mean, it's early, but he don't.
Right. I mean, you never know. Like, there's so many teams that have never had a franchise quarterback. And then there's some that run into him, like Green Bay seems to find one every time one of them retires after 20 years. The Jets have never had a franchise. Well, I guess Joe Namath was, but they haven't had one since Joe Namath. They keep bringing in retreads that they didn't draft, and all the Jets draft picks have failed. So there's a lot of Washington really hasn't had one. You're going to consider Joe Theismann one, okay, but it's hard to get these guys. You could take the guy with the most talent. We've seen guys like Jamarcus Russell that didn't even play in the NFL, barely. Ryan Leaf, there's a lot of guys that were like top end spectrum talent. You look at Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, and you're thinking this guy, at least I thought he can't miss. This guy's generational, and he's really struggling. So, Bryce Young, even though he's playing better now, but it's another guy. These guys are the first picks in the draft. You just you don't know. But I have to trust that he gets it right. At least I hope he gets it right.
Or at least trust that he gets his opportunity. That's it. I mean, whether or not he gets it right, we'll see. But I think he's going to get his swing. I do. I'm not buying into this narrative that they're firing Joe Schoen. I'm really not. I don't see it. Dable very well could.